In the early 1940s, as Imperial Japan expanded across the Pacific, its military engineers faced a terrifying realization. The United States was coming. The industrial might of America, its shipyards, its air power, its endless supply of men and machines, would eventually storm across the ocean. Japan needed something massive, something terrifying, something impossible to break. And so, deep within the Naval High Command, a radical idea was born. Create an island fortress so powerful, so heavily armed, and so deeply entrenched that no invading army could ever hope to take it. It would be a fortress the size of a nation. Truk Lagoon, the Japanese Gibraltar of the Pacific. Massive airfields, radar stations, fuel depots, submarine bases, torpedo storage, anti-aircraft belts, coastal artillery, and entire fleets sheltered beneath its calm blue waters. To the Japanese, Truk was not just a base. It was the beating heart of their Pacific empire. The Allies even called it the Fortress of Truk, a name spoken with fear. Soldiers believed it would become the biggest bloodbath since Guadalcanal if America ever tried to invade. But destiny had other plans. The fortress Japan built to be unstoppable would become the fortress America never bothered to attack at all. To understand the magnitude of Truk's importance, imagine a natural lagoon the size of New Jersey, ringed by dozens of islands forming a perfect defensive circle. Within this lagoon, the water was so deep that battleships could anchor safely. The reefs formed a natural barrier against enemy landing craft. The mountains provided ideal spots for anti-aircraft batteries and radar posts. The airfields could launch bombers and fighters in every direction. It was, militarily speaking, a paradise, an island fortress formed by nature and perfected by Japanese engineering. Japan poured everything into it. By 1943, Truk was hosting the entire Japanese combined fleet, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, thousands of aircraft, the Yamato-class resupply groups, 40,000 troops, underground bunkers tunneled through volcanic rock. Observers called it Japan's Pearl Harbor, the ultimate stronghold, the nerve center from which Japanese offensives across New Guinea, the Solomons, and the Central Pacific were coordinated. If America wanted to drive toward the home islands, it had to take Truk. That was the expectation, that was the logic. But American strategy was about to break all traditional logic. Enter Admiral Chester Nimitz, the strategy of bypassing death. In 1943, Admiral Nimitz studied the map of the Pacific with a quiet, calculating mind. The Marine Corps expected bloody island assaults across every major stronghold, places like Truk, Rabaul, and Palau. Traditional military theory said you must eliminate every fortress to secure your supply lines. But Nimitz saw something different. He saw time, distance, cost, and unnecessary bloodshed. Why attack a fortress, he wondered. If a fortress could be neutralized without being touched. It was a revolutionary idea, one that went against decades of naval doctrine. Instead of assaulting Japan's strongest positions, Nimitz wanted to leapfrog them, cut their supply lines, isolate them, and let them wither and starve. It was warfare by starvation and suffocation, not direct confrontation. Marine leaders were stunned. Army generals doubted the logic. Even some admirals feared that bypassing Truk would allow Japan to strike American supply lines later. But Nimitz held firm. "We will not waste American lives taking islands we do not need," he said. "We will go around them. We will kill them without firing a shot." Japan had built a fortress. Nimitz planned to make it a prison, the build-up to Operation Hailstone. Before the U.S. could bypass Truk, it had to cripple it. Not by invasion, but by air assault. An attack so devastating that Truk would never again function as Japan's Pacific Command Center. In February 1944, American carriers gathered into a massive strike force. 5 fleet carriers, 4 light carriers, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, over 500 aircraft. It was one of the largest carrier strike groups ever assembled in the Pacific at the time. Pilots trained relentlessly. Recon planes mapped every runway, every ship, every gun position. U.S. intelligence confirmed that Japanese carriers had just evacuated, but hundreds of ships and aircraft remained in the lagoon. The American plan was simple. 1. Smash Truk's airfields. 2. Sink every ship inside the lagoon. 3. Destroy every fuel tank. 4. Render the fortress useless. 5. Then bypass it forever. The operation was named Hailstone, as in a storm of ice and steel. Japan had expected the U.S. to invade. Instead, The U.S. prepared to cripple the fortress from the sky. On the morning of February 17, 1944, the calm blue skies over Truk darkened as hundreds of American aircraft appeared like a swarm. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers, Hellcat fighters. It was a thunderstorm of U.S. naval aviation. Japanese radar detected the incoming wave too late. Their fighters scrambled in panic. Pilots raced to runways still littered with fuel barrels, supply crates, and wreckage. American Hellcats swept in first, clearing the skies. In less than an hour, nearly every Japanese fighter defending Truk was either shot down or destroyed on the ground. Then came the bombers. Torpedo planes flew low over the lagoon, weaving between islands, locking onto cruisers, destroyers, transports, tankers. Dive bombers screamed downward, dropping payloads onto ships clustered helplessly below. Explosions echoed across the lagoon. Ships burned. Ammunition depots erupted. Fuel tanks sent pillars of black smoke into the sky. Japanese officers on the ground watched their invincible fortress disintegrate in real time. And yet, this was just the first wave. The lagoon becomes a graveyard of steel. For 2 days, American aircraft blasted Truk without pause. Every ship that tried to escape was hunted by submarines waiting outside the reef. Every submarine Japan tried to deploy was sunk by destroyers patrolling the perimeter. Inside the lagoon, it became hell on earth. The cruiser Nagara was torn apart. Destroyers like Oiti sank with entire crews trapped below deck. Transport ships exploded as fuel tanks ignited. Japanese sailors dove into flaming water to escape the inferno. The lagoon echoed with the sounds of bursting torpedoes, collapsing hulls, screaming engines, and the relentless thunder of bombs smashing steel. By the end, over 250,000 tons of Japanese shipping had been destroyed, one of the largest naval air defeats in world history. When the smoke cleared, the once proud Truk Lagoon, Japan's ultimate fortress, had become a silent graveyard of warships. Today, divers call it the Ghost Fleet of Truk, because dozens of ships remain at the bottom, frozen in time. The fortress isolated, no invasion needed. After Operation Hailstone, American commanders prepared for the next step. Not an invasion, but abandonment. With its fleet destroyed, its airfields crippled, and its supply lines severed, Truk could no longer function as a military base. But Japan still had 40,000 troops stationed there, waiting for an American landing that would never come. For 2 years, those troops remained stuck on the fortress island, completely cut off. No resupply, no reinforcements, no evacuation. They became prisoners on their own base. Soldiers planted crops, fished for food, dug wells, and scavenged abandoned wrecks to survive. They had been prepared for the greatest battle of the Pacific. Instead, they fought the slow war of starvation. Many never fired a gun at an American soldier. Many never saw battle again. The U.S. had neutralized Japan's greatest fortress through a simple, brutal strategy. Ignore it. Let it rot. Save American lives. The shock in Tokyo. When Tokyo received reports of Truk's destruction and abandonment, the shock was immense. Generals expected a bloody battle. They expected brave soldiers to die defending the fortress. But instead, they learned the Americans had simply walked around it. Japanese high command had spent years preparing for a fight that never came. All that effort, all the concrete bunkers, the gun emplacements, the fuel depots, the torpedo storage, was wasted. Worse, the fortress now had no warships, no supplies, and no purpose. It was a strategic embarrassment, a monument to outdated military thinking. The U.S. had proven that naval warfare was no longer about holding islands. It was about mobility, air power, and logistics.
Next.
Japan's fortress strategy, once considered brilliant, now looked hopelessly obsolete. After Truk was neutralized without invasion, the U.S. applied the same strategy repeatedly. Rabaul, bypassed. Kavieng, bypassed. New Britain, bypassed. Instead of storming every stronghold, America captured only the islands needed for airfields, stepping stones straight toward Japan. Each bypassed fortress became a dead zone full of starving troops. Each leap forward brought bombers closer to Tokyo. What Japan thought was a defensive wall turned out to be nothing more than slow-moving targets. By 1945, the U.S. had built a highway of air bases across the Pacific, allowing B-29s to bomb Japan's home islands relentlessly. The fortress strategy died with Truk. The age of mobile warfare, carriers, air power, logistics was fully born. Even if the US had attacked Truk with infantry, it would have been a nightmare. Thousands of tunnels, hundreds of artillery guns hidden in caves, miles of jungle and volcanic rock. But Nimitz saw its weakness. Truk was too big, too expensive, and too isolated. Its strength was also its greatest weakness. It needed massive fuel shipments, weekly food shipments, replacement aircraft, engineers, and ammunition. Once those supply lines were cut, Truk was doomed. A fortress without food is a tomb. A fortress without fuel is a museum. A fortress without resupply is a prison. And Japan simply didn't have the naval strength to keep it alive once America controlled the skies. In the end, Truk collapsed not from bombs, but from starvation. The US never needed to set foot on its beaches. By mid-1945, when Japan prepared to surrender, the troops at Truk were nearly forgotten. Malnutrition had ravaged the ranks. Medical supplies were gone. Ammunition was scarce. Soldiers lived in caves, drank rainwater, and hunted coconut crabs to survive. When American ships finally arrived after Japan's surrender, the soldiers expected to be massacred. Instead, they were given food, water, medical aid. Many wept openly. They had been abandoned by their own empire, left to die defending a fortress the Americans never wanted. For historians, Truk became a symbol of everything wrong with Japan's WWII strategy: overconfidence, rigidity, and faith in defensive walls in an era when air power ruled supreme. The story of Truk Lagoon is more than a military footnote. It is a case study in genius. The US didn't defeat the fortress by outgunning it. They defeated it by outthinking it. Nimitz proved that the strongest position is meaningless if it can be isolated. He proved that supply lines matter more than concrete, and he proved that in modern warfare, mobility beats fortification every single time. Truk still sits today beneath turquoise waters, its sunken ships covered in coral and silence. A ghost of a war that ended long ago, a fortress no one ever stormed, a monument to a strategy Japan believed was unstoppable, until the US simply ignored it. And in that quiet, unspoken victory, the course of the Pacific War and world history was changed forever.